Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today I'm going to be doing a bit of work on the computer. So for this morning I'm going to be using Affinity Designer, but if you want to use Adobe Illustrator, Inkscape, CorelDRAW, Scale, take your pick, because you'll be able to do everything I do today in those programs. So first of all, hi Thea, hi Sally, hope you're feeling better today. And glad to see that the captions just aren't picking me up at all. And morning Deb. So if you watched yesterday's stream, you'll have seen that I went through the process of starting to put together a little collection of elements to work on. And today I want to actually create those with you. So morning Carol. That's good to hear, Sally. So I'm going to start off by creating my stencil. Now to create a stencil we want to have an outside shape that is going to form the outside cut line of our stencil. And then we're going to be doing little cutout sections in our stencil. So if you're working in Scale, you have a really easy way of creating stencils in terms of being able to bridge them. It's a little bit different in Affinity and other programs, so I'll show you how we can do bridges and things as well. So without too much further ado, let's get started. So I have my little square tool and I'm going to go for that first of all. And I do apologise if you're watching on YouTube because I can't see your comments at the moment. And hi Mum, happy birthday. Hi Linda. I'm going to draw in my first outside line, and you'll notice when you're drawing in Affinity in particular, it's going to come in with this grey line, grey fill shape with no outline is what I'm trying to say. And obviously when we're working with stencils and cut lines, normally what we want to see is the outline and not the shape that we're making. So I'm just going to go into stroke and I'm going to sort that out so that I have a solid stroke. And I'm going to take the fill away. So that doesn't change how the machine sees the shape, but it's easier for you to see on screen. Hi Tracy. Sorry about that, I forgot that I turned off the Restream chat on display, just so that we could have a bit more of a working area. So now I'm going to do my streamer stencil. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that, and I wanted to show you just a few. So the first one's the really obvious one of using the pen tool, and we're going to go and do a little bit of a wavy line. Okay, go to our arrow tool and I'm going to make that a bit bigger. Okay, now because it's a streamer we don't want it to have this kind of rounded top and bottom, so we can change the cap. So that's going to put up to our final point rather than extending beyond it. Okay, so if I click off it you can now see that we've got this lovely straight line. So that's one way that we can do it, and when we have something where we've thickened the line you need to outline that line. So if we expand stroke in Affinity, and then it's going to trace around the outside. Okay, so you'll find the wording just vary between programs, but most will let you have that functionality. And hi Natalie. So that's one option that we have for creating our streamer. The next is our pencil tool, and we can do a little bit of manual drawing instead. So if you don't like to use nodes, we can do that, and it becomes much more natural. So especially when we're working with something that's going to be free flowing or organic, so like water, foliage, then 9 times out of 10 you'll find it more comfortable to draw with a pencil than trying to create that irregularity with a pen. And finally, we have the vector brush tool. So what this actually does is it actually moves a brush stroke along a path. So if I go and draw down here, you can see it's going to just draw with a round brush, but we can actually change which brushes that we're using, and we can draw multiple lines at once. I know the time just zooms by, and the benefit of using a vector brush is that we still have this path in here. So if we don't like how this little bit works in here, we can actually move that, edit it. We can drag out our handles in the same way to soften our curves that we've become used to now, and we've got a much more free-flowing curve. So those are the 3 main ways that you're going to be creating streamers. So I'm working in Affinity Designer Natalie, but you can do the same process in Illustrator, Inkscape, CorelDRAW. So let's go back to our original streamer, because I'm quite liking this little pencil drawn one just here. And you'll start to find that there'll be times when different ways work better for you. So I quite like using the vector brush because of having that editability. And I'm just going to draw in some streamers like so. And we can do some little ones. And in my design I even did some little curly ones, so we can do those in a little curve like so. And as long as our start and end points of our line don't match up, it's not going to go into a closed path. Can you do it in GIMP? Ooh. Now GIMP's a bit more like Photoshop, so while you can do it in there, you'll have to trace it to then send it to your machine. But if you're used to doing that way, then yes, you can do it in GIMP. So essentially what we're drawing with at the moment are vectors. So that's why we have this little line coming up through here. And that's how we can then start to manipulate what we've drawn. We can then trace that outline and send that to your scanning cut. Oh, insert your cutter name here. Okay, so we've done our streamers, and if we were to cut this at the moment, we might find it's a bit too flimsy for what we want. So we can actually start to put in a few little bridges if we need to. So if a piece is particularly long and you're worried that it's going to warp a bit when you're actually using it, we can put in a tiny bridge. So if we zoom in a bit. First of all, I'm going to take all of those curves and I'm going to convert them so that instead of having this blue line down the middle, I'm going to trace around the outside. So we're going to go to Layer, Expand Stroke, and you'll see that these now all become shapes rather than lines. Okay. So if we click on this one here, we can see there's a little bit of a glitch just in there. I'm just going to move that slightly so that we don't have any random sort of points going on. And that's just something to be aware of when we're drawing with the pencil tool, is that we don't get anything like this being sent to our cutter, because sharp points aren't good for it. can actually use our handles. I'm just going to take that point out. And up here we've got some little convert options. So I want to convert it to being a smooth point so that it's equal, or we have smart. So sometimes smart will do it better. So if we go smart, we've got a little handle and we can kind of make it look like we've got a bit of a tapering going on, and we can go in there, just edit that bit. Okay, so the idea is we don't want to have too many nodes overlapping, because that's where our cutter can start to become a little bit upset with us. Just a little. Okay, so with that bit happier. Oh, there's one just there. Let's put in a bridge. So let's go for a long piece. So this one here is quite long. And this is how we can join like the centre of letters. Or if you've done a design where you want to have an element that has a central point to it, so like a donut or something like that, then you need a bridge to hold that centre in place. So to do that, I'm going to draw a shape. Now at this point you're going to go, wow, that is way too big, and it's an illusion because of the thicker stroke. So at this point I'm going to take that stroke away and I'm going to put the fill on instead, and I'm going to give it a colour so that we can see it. So what that means is we can now see exactly where that bridge is going to go and how big it is precisely. Okay, so that fill will always go right up to that path line rather than extending beyond it. Then when we're happy with where that bridge is, we can actually select both that bridge and our shape that we want to put that bridge into. We can go up to our calculations or geometry depending on your software, and we can go to subtract. So in Illustrator that's in Pathfinder. Oh, sorry to hear they're still in pain, Tracy, and give our love to Emma and hope they're both on the mend soon. Habit, Carol, habit is the answer. Okay, so again, I'm going to pop a bridge in. Now when we're doing our bridges, we want to try and keep them fairly similar in width, so that's consistent, and we can pop that in there. Even though in actuality these may be quite thin, it's just there to hold it together. Oh, okay. So that's how we can add bridges. If you're working in scale, there's actually a special bridge tool that you can use instead. Going to move that one down a bit just so it's got a bit of a... So one of the things I was saying yesterday was about having it so it could repeat. So at the moment if we were to repeat that, it's going to look kind of repetitive. But what we can do is if we actually start to consider how we can nest this shape into this one, so that instead of having a straight repeat we can actually start to have a bit more organic. So this curve here is quite loose while this one's quite tight, so if we imagine that's going over there, it might not look quite as good, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stretch. Now if you'd like me to do a tutorial on a full seamless blend, pop it in the comments and I will try and do that next week. So I'm going to pop this one just about here. And I'm going to stretch this one down a little bit too. That's better. And just because they all seem to be angling the same way, I'm just going to twist that one. Pop that there. And then this one can move down a bit. And this one can move there. So it starts to look a little bit more like we've got a kind of even flow. So that's our first stencil done. Are there any questions on stencils before I move on to the next piece? So the other stencil I mentioned doing was the diagonal one. Now obviously I did a diagonal one a couple of weeks ago. So what I would do is just take that same stencil and just crop that diagonal section so that it's down and has the gap at the top like in the diagram that I did yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to group those elements so that they then stay together. Next we have our two cloud stencils. So we had one where the cloud circles were going inwards and one where it's going outwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in a new page like so. So if you think that you're not going to have enough room, then don't be afraid to just add in a new artboard to work on. Just when you're exporting it, make sure that you do it by individual artboard rather than trying to export the whole lot. Otherwise when you take it into Canvas it's going to resize and shrink it down to fit. So this time I'm going to give myself a rough guide to work to. So I'm going to pop in kind of a centre guide, if it can find the centre. Clicking over there at the moment, but that's close enough. So I want one to go in there and one to go in there. So for this first one, I'm going to start off with a circle. Okay. And we're going to actually subtract our elements from it. So what we may find is that we actually end up pulling that circle about a bit to get it to fit. I'm going to click off that circle, go back to my circle tool, and I'm going to change the fill to, let's go to an orange. And that's so that we can see anywhere where that red circle isn't quite right. So now we're going to draw in circles. So when we're drawing a circle in Affinity or any other software, if you press and hold Shift, it should draw it as an actual circle rather than an oval. Okay. Now bear in mind this is going to be eating out of this big shape. And on my diagram I've got lots of different size circles, so I'm going to take a copy of that circle. So that's pressing and holding Alt, click, drag, let go of the mouse, let go of Alt, and then I'm going to press and hold Shift and I'm going to resize that downwards. Okay. We can take another copy of those two circles, we can rotate it slightly if we want to, and we'll pop them over here for now. I'm going to take another copy of this one, and I'm going to resize it again. So the idea being we want this kind of regular edge that we can use different sections of it to create our clouds. So let's drag in another couple of these, and I'm just going to work around the outside, just kind of creating a cloud formation that we can use in our artwork. So you're looking at this line here on this one and seeing how that's working. And we can then pinch you a bit, so if you think, okay, yeah, I'm going to take that bit, we can drop that down there. We could take this bit here and rotate that round if you want to, or we can go, actually I'm going to get that side in like that. Don't be worried if your circle goes off the edge of your artboard, because we're going to subtract it anyway. Just concentrate on this inner line in here, because that's where your ink's going to go. Let's go that way. Okay, so we can see our red circle doesn't quite fit. I'm just going to drag it out so that it's beyond our line here, maybe down a bit here. Okay, so you're going to have something that looks like that. Now, if you're happy with your outside edge too, to make life a little bit easier, I'm just going to take those, press and hold Alt, and drag it across to this quadrant here, and let go. Then I'm going to select these ones here and just those ones, like so. I can then go up to subtract, and we have our cloud stencil. Okay, now see how we've got this little bit just here? That's going to be part of that same shape. So if we go to nodes, we can see that it's got some stray nodes there. So just click and drag over the top and hit backspace, and we can take those out. And at this point, if we want to, we can drag that back to our other artboard, which has our stencil material anyway. So now we can work back onto this side here. And again, bear in mind that because we have that little bit of a red dot there, I'm just going to bring that in just a fraction. Bring that up to compensate. Okay, and I think I'm happy with that. Click and drag over the top. And this time, instead of using subtract, we're going to use add. And we have our other cloud template. So if you want to do an edge of cloud, you can use this one. If you want to just do pretty fluffy little clouds and just pick the highlight over the top, we can use this one. And now that we've done that and we can see that we've got plenty of room for it, we can pop that back onto our original artboard. So hopefully you're all okay. Did anybody do anything different for their... Yeah, you could almost turn it into coronavirus if you really want to, but nah. Maybe if I was doing like a spreading media traveller's notebook back hand me job, but that's about it. It's about the only mention it's going to get in the scrapbook. Okay, so next we're looking at balloons. Now these were originally designed as a print and cut, so even though we're working in a document that is only 96 dpi, if you want to you could still do your print and cut elements in here. And captions are really mental today, aren't they? You can tell I don't usually watch the comments on Facebook. So I'm going to draw a balloon. Start off with an ellipse, like so. So it's kind of balloon shaped, but it's not right. So I'm going to go to Layer, Convert to Curves. Now that step is important because up until that point it's just a shape rather than a path. So by doing that little process we then get access to the nodes. So we can click on a node. I'm just going to widen it slightly at the top. And likewise down here, I'm going to bring it in a bit. Like so. Now with these two handles here, you can choose if you want to just slightly twist those outwards. So our balloon starts to look a bit more balloon-like. It's also a good kind of starting point for a face as well. So it's a good one to learn, that one. So that's wider at the top, narrower at the bottom, and then angle out the two sides. And if I click off it, you can then see we have the start of balloon shape. Now depending on your software, you may have a little trapezoid tool. If not, you can just use your pen tool. I'm just going to drag out a little tiny one like so, and you want to make sure that it overlaps, so we're going to take that and just nudge it upwards with the keyboard if Snap is being annoying. Okay, so there's our balloon. Now what we need to do is we need to weld those two together. Okay, I'm going to go and create a new layer, and I'm going to call it Cut. And I'm going to take that shape and I'm going to drop it into it. There we go. So because it's a cut layer, I'm just going to sort that out on top. And you'll notice that I did the fill then too. Okay. So what we can then do is we're going to duplicate that shape. So that's Command and J or Control and J in some software. Or you can use copy and paste or copy and paste in place, which means it's going to lay that shape directly over the top of where it was copied from. We're going to start a new layer and call that Print. Are you going to come and say hello, are you?
Briefly.
Isn't there something else you need to say? Yeah.
Happy birthday, Quaid. I'll leave you in peace again.
Yeah.
I just like to come and say hi and finally get my bit on kettles on. Yeah, I'll deal with that. But
Okay. So I'm going to drag in one of our copies into our print layer, and that means that we can then create our print layer. I will pass on your highs when he comes back past. He's making me a cup of tea, so I should be back in shortly. Okay, so with our shape selected, we're going to go to our contour tool. Now, if you don't have a contour tool, it's probably going to be known as offset path in Illustrator, for example, or offset or contour in other software. And it's basically where we're expanding our shape a regular amount all the way around. So at the moment, you can see that it says radius is 0, which means basically it's staying as is. If we then change that to 3mm, I'm going to keep it, actually, because of this little bit down here, rather than going round, I'm going to go pointy. So let's go 3mm and enter with our pointy little section down here. Because if we did round, it would round it off round here, which isn't necessarily what I want to do. And I'm happy with how the corners are going around this section, so we don't have to worry about the mitre. The cap only applies if you're doing it to an open path. So then we can go and bake appearance. So that sets that offset in stone. So if we were to hide our cut layer, you'd see that we've just got our outside shape. So everything that we want to do colour wise for our printing cut, we want to put into this expanded layer. So we can choose a colour. Let's go fairly red actually. Okay. And then we can actually put highlights into it if we want to. And we can do that either by using our vector brush, like we did at the beginning, or we can go into our pixel persona and do it that way. The choice is yours, whichever you're more comfortable with. So I'm going to go to the vector brush, and I want to do a highlight, so I'm going to go and make that, let's go pinky rather than white. And rather than going for pens, let's go for something that's a bit softer. So let's go for some watercolour and try that. And if your brush is too big, we can actually resize that brush down using our square brackets. So it's open square bracket to shrink down and close square bracket to size up. And we can click and drag that around like so. So there's a highlight onto our balloon. And we can even then change the colour. And let's go for a kind of muted red. And we can go and bring that in down here. Like so. So I'm going to bring that cut there up top so we can see that a little bit easier. Come on. Up, 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 up. Take the cut there down. There we go. So there's where our machine is actually going to cut. So you can see this bit here, it's just a little bit too low, so I'm just going to bring that in a little bit. And what I really like about vector brushes is we can actually go back and go, actually, that colour's not quite right. We can change the colour. And it's the same with our highlight if we want to soften that back a bit further. So it looks a bit more rubbery rather than plasticky. And we can. And we can even still change that stroke width. So if we go in here, we can see we can actually shrink that down. So nothing is set in stone. And we can either change where this line goes to. So if we want to change the curve. So if it's snapping and annoying you, if you press and hold Alt instead while you're actually moving, it's going to ignore that snap. I'm just going to change that handle slightly just so we've got a little bit of a lighter edge on this edge. Like so. So with our bottom outside curve, I'm just going to take that stroke off because we don't need it. And it just makes it a little bit more obvious then that although it's printing up to this edge, it's actually going to be cutting here. And what that 3mm is there for is to give you a little bit of leeway. So if you don't get the cut line precisely lined up on your machine, or if your machine's a little out, it won't matter. So now that we've done one balloon and we've got our printing cut element set up, one of the other options that I've got is to do it as a stamp. So I'm going to go back to my cut layer one, and again I'm going to copy it. I'm going to do another new layer, and I'm going to call it stamp. Now in essence what I mean here with stamp is you can either use your printer to print it out and then colour it in, or you could get your Scan and Cut to draw it. The choice is yours. So that's one of the pleasures of working in Vector, is that you have both options available to you. So I'm going to put my balloon into that layer. So there should be a little bit of an indent, then you know it's in that layer. And then I can actually drag that across. So just so I don't disturb my print cut, I'm just going to use the keyboard just to nudge it across. And then we can start to work with things like our variable stroke. So if we go down to where it says pressure here, or if you're working in Illustrator, you have the line width tool that you can do the same effect with. Or if you're working with a graphics tablet in some other software, you can use that to control your pressure instead. Thank you. And Linda, Tracy say hi. Mum says thank you.
Those were just competition.
Oh.
Okay. I checked that place, it sounded like he knocked the versions out there. So.
Oh.
Right, I'll leave you in peace.
Okay. So let's go back to my balloon. Pressure. Now if we take these points, it's going to kind of just do it at a flat level, and you may think if you do that and you don't know any better that it's just changing the line width, but it's actually not. So if you look up here, our line width isn't changing. What this does is say how much of that line width it's going to utilise. So if we click in the middle, it's going to add another point. So just a straight click. We can then drag that upwards, like so. And that's going to mean that we have a thicker line here than we do at these 2 points. So if I put this line width up silly, you can see that we've got that kind of almost hand lettering style pressure change. But we can actually get much more detailed with this tool than just having it go in just that 1 point. So if you want to actually change at different points, we can use our little note here to change that. We can have this bit thinner and this bit can come out a bit, and likewise we could do so it goes a bit thinner that side. So if you look down at the bottom of our balloon, you can start to see that now we've got this kind of even amount down here. Now if you want these 2 points here to be different, you can do, but for now I want it to kind of flow round. Okay. Now what I would say is at some point you always want to make sure that this point is touching the top of that line, because if you want to make it thinner and this is at the top, you want to just be changing your line width instead of using this section down here, and you'll give yourself a greater degree of control that way. Okay, so let's put a bit of weight up here. Now if I take this up sharply, you're going to see it gets a little bit of a kink just here, and that's because it's got this sudden jump. So that's something you want to be aware of. So sometimes you can use it to your benefit, and other times you're going to want to be very wary of how that line is changing. I think it'd be nice to have it thicker down there because we're going to have that natural shading towards the bottom. We can take it a bit thinner at the top, and we can make it a bit thicker. Now let's get the positioning right. If we follow it round, okay, this one needs to move over a little bit, and you can see as I'm moving, that line is changing. It's also one of those times when you find that changing your start end point can be helpful. So there you go, we're starting to create that variation in line that's going to make it look a bit more drawn rather than created. So there's our outline of our stamp. I'm just going to drop that back into that stamp there. So next I want to actually work inside this shape. So let's get my pen tool, and let's say I want to create a little highlight in here. I'm going to do a little bit of a click and drag, and you can see straight away it's pulled up that same profile that we've used on our balloon. Don't worry about that for now because we're probably going to want to change that anyway. So I'm going to click down here, and we're going to go back up here, curve it back, and we can take that back there, and we can just click and drag. So when we click and drag, it's going to do a curve. When we just simply click, it's going to do a corner. And we can use our handles to adjust if we need to. So at the moment you're looking at this and you're thinking, wow, that doesn't really look like a highlight. And what you have to do is you have to look at the blue line rather than what the red line is doing. Okay, because the blue line is what your computer is really seeing, whereas the stroke that is placed upon it is just an appearance. So if you just think of it like that, so the path is the important bit of data. So we've got this kind of wobbly profile that we've got for our pressure, and if you really like that brush you could save it if you want to, but for now I'm just going to reset, and that's going to put it all back to being a straight 100% of that line width all the way around. And then we can see that actually we might not want to have it as thick as that outline, so we can take it a bit thinner. We can change our stroke like so. I'm just going to lift that handle up there a little bit and drag that out there, just so I can pull this down there. So the more you work with nodes and paths, the more you're going to get used to going, well actually that needs to move to that particular point, that handle there needs to come out so that it's got that same amount of space between the path and the handle to get a nice smooth flow. Okay, and we can even start to do like some little inflection lines if we want to, so let's just go down here. I'm just going to do some little dashes. bear in mind that while we're doing this, we still have our old caps on. So I'm going to go back to our round ones, and those just look a little bit better when we're doing things like hand drawing. And then when we start to play with pressure, it's going to round it off nicely. So I'm going to pull those down slightly. I'm going to lift up in the middle, and you can see that then you have this kind of rounded effect. If we slide this point over to our left, you can see that it's almost weighted like a dash stroke. So you're going to get that hit of the pen and then it's lifting off. And we can put those a little closer together. So again, if snap is being annoying, just press and hold Alt once you are moving. And if something's too small like this is, we can zoom right in and get it that way. Like so. Now bear in mind with all these, at the moment these are still strokes on a path. So if you want to get your Scan and Cut to draw this out with this same amount of weight change, you do need to outline those strokes in the same way that we were doing before. If you're going to print it, it doesn't really matter, either way will do. But the important bit is if you're going to send it to a cutter or plotter. And I can even do the same down here. Okay, so if we look at this line here, I'm just going to make it a little bit thicker so you can see that a little bit easier. Because I started drawing at the bottom and worked my way up, you can see it's done that darker bit down here and lifted up here. If you wanted to change that round but it was easier for you to draw that way, then what you can actually do is reverse that path. So if you go into your node tool, and up here there's a little button that looks like a kind of loop back on itself. And what that means is it's going to turn it round. So if we press that one, you can see it changes, so our thicker part is up towards the top. Now that's a really useful function to learn, because if you're welding letters and you're finding that you're having issues, so it's complaining at you or just plain refusing to do it, if you want to still be able to weld those letters, if you try and use reverse curves on them, you will probably find that that will solve your issue in almost 9 out of 10 cases. Okay, so useful function to learn. So there's our stamp, and we had our group one as well. So if you want to do that, what you need to decide at this point is, are you going to want to do that print and cut? Probably not, because I had it so that we had a stamp stencil and die going on. So I'm going to fill my bottom stamp balloon in white, and that's important because then it's going to mask it. And let's drop all these other elements in here too. We're going to select all those and group, so they're all grouped into one shape. I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to look at my diagram that I did, and I can just do a few copies, roughly positioning as I'm going, so I can kind of see how those are facing out to each other. And there's another one, and it goes a bit more out that way. And then there's another one that comes up here, and it goes more this angle. Okay, at this point you need to decide which order they're going to go in. So the easiest way of sending things forwards and backwards, Command, Shift and open square bracket is going to send something to the back of that layer. Okay. If you do close square bracket, it's going to bring it to the front. Okay. If we do just command and open square bracket, it's going to go back one layer. Likewise, command and close square bracket is going to bring it forward one layer. Okay, so if you're on PC, where I say command, just swap that for control. So now you want to find the order that pleases you for the layout. So I'm actually going to push these back like that, but I actually quite like having these ones kind of coming out a bit more forward. And I'm just going to tweak this one because it just looks like they were too similar in terms of angle. And I might even rotate this one round this way now. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 balloons. So we need to make sure that there are 5 strings. So I'm going to come in with my pen tool. I'm going to click and drag so that it curves round my balloon because it's not a square balloon that's tied round. And then we can start to do a little bit of a waggly string. So if you want to do your strings dead taut, you can do. But I just think for this one it'll look a bit more bouncy if there's a little bit of curve to that string. I'm also going to bring them all to one point so that then when I get around to doing the bow, that we can just do that and then sort out the ends after. So given time, I'm going to show you the strings that we're going to do, and then this afternoon I will carry on and do the rest of the elements and pop those up online so you can see those. So with that one curve done, I'm going to click off it, do the next one, and again click and drag, and we can go around here. And it might even be that it starts to cross over, so we can do something like this. So we have another string there. And another one here. Now at this time, notice I have not created the outlines for any of these paths. And that's because if you want to create things like the die and the stencil that I was talking about yesterday, you want to make sure that you keep that path information so that we can always duplicate that and then just apply a normal stroke to it. So there's our 4 strings, and we've got one that's got to come down here, and so our string would probably come round about there. So round here, and then click there, take that round that way. If it goes slightly off, that's okay because it's still all editable, so I'm going to take that back to that point. We can use our handle like so. Oh, bye Sally. Sorry I've missed you. Okay. So there's our balloons. And now you might go, right, okay, those are way too big for what I need, so I can resize those down. Now, this is another thing to bear in mind. When we are resizing, you'll notice that as I'm going down, that black outline appears to get thicker. And that isn't what's actually happening. That actual line width is staying the same, but because we're shrinking, it's going to give that appearance of getting thicker. So if we go back up to where it was, what you actually want to do is on your stroke panel, you'll see there's this little box here, scale with object. If we tick that, and then when we scale, you're going to see that line width is going to stay consistent. So whenever we're sizing something downwards, you're going to want to make sure that we keep that ticked. Otherwise you can end up with something that looks totally different to how you intended. Now if you've already done create your outlines when you do your scaling, you'll find that does that automatically, because it won't be a stroke anymore, it will be a shape. But if you're still working with outlines like I am, then you want to have that option. Also make sure you hold shift while resizing so you don't distort it too much. And I'm going to go so it's about that big. So that's still quite big in terms of a card, but it's also going to still fit in terms of if you want to go to a slim line because of that width. So if you wanted to stop there, you can do. If you don't want to put the bow on, the choice is yours. And like I said, if you want to then do a stencil so that we can actually have that as a separate option, I'm going to take one of our groups, I'm going to duplicate it out, now if I go into that group, I don't need any of this additional information that's in it, I just need that shape. I'm going to go to a layer, expand stroke because I want the outside of that shape, and then I can delete this inner space in here. So there's two ways of doing that. We can actually go and delete the nodes, or we can just go divide and weld, which is nice and easy. And that's going to give us a solid shape that then we can take over and pop that onto our stencil material. Now that's going to leave behind a little element here, that's okay, we can just delete that away like so. So if you wanted to pop this in the middle of your cloud stencil to save yourself some material, you could do. In actual fact, it would probably work quite well on that one. So then what you could do is I'm just going to subtract that out so we can see that's what our stencil is going to look like. You've all been awfully quiet today. And finally, if we want to have a cut line for just our balloons so that we can pop those out, we can do that too. So again, I'm going to select our groups, I'm going to copy and paste, drag those across here, and likewise again we don't need any additional information that's in these, so we can just go in and delete that out. So just ungroup those, it's just easier that way. Okay, so I'm going to go from there to there and delete those, there to there, delete those. And that one's there we go. So because with our stamped image we won't have a bleed as such, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to keep these kind of paths as they are. I'm going to weld them, and then I'm just going to place a normal stroke. So I'm going to reset that path. I'm going to bring it down in size so that I can see that I have a cut file for this element here. So don't worry if you don't get what I'm doing at first time. You can rewatch on both Facebook, YouTube. Twitch keeps it up for a few days, so you should be able to watch back on there. And of course, if you ever need any help, you can always message me, Ian, or the Plannercraft pages. And there are contact details on the blog too. So what I might do, actually, because I haven't had time to do my sentiments this morning, I might just do those as a little stream either later or possibly tomorrow. So we'll see how we go. So given that it's now 12 o'clock and I'm now crossing into Lou's time, I will let you go and watch Lou and have some doodling fun. Don't forget, Leslie's on at 12:30 and she's going to be showing the DT samples from Friday's show. So if you were lucky enough to go and get something from that one, that's definitely going to be a must watch, because the samples, you never see them up to the standard that you can do when they're on telly. So it's always good to go and catch up with Leslie's stream because she shows them really close up and in lots of detail. So take care for now, and I'll see you same time tomorrow, if not before. Bye!